Many in our audience were not born or certainly not old enough to be aware of the horrors of 9/11. Please describe what happened that day and how it led to your book, Thunderdog. And of course, we already know that at age 14, you got your first guide dog.
Well, so on September 11th, we were going to be holding some seminars teaching some of our reseller partners how to sell our products. And at 8:45, I was in my office along with a colleague, David Frank, who had flown in the night before. David was going to be the person to talk about pricing and pricing models and so on and help our reseller partners. My job was to be, and David didn't live there, so my job was to be the day-to-day technical contact, having a master's degree in physics, learning all the technical aspects of products. I even helped our sales engineers and service engineers diagnose problems sometimes. But the bottom line is that I knew how to do that and knew how to be technical because that's what my background was. So as I always also told all my salespeople, and it's something that I talk a lot about when I talk about teamwork and traveling the country or the world, speaking today, what I told them was, I hired you because you convinced me that you could sell. I hope that you will. But my job is not to boss you around, but rather to work with you to figure out how I can add value to what you do. And certainly having a technical knowledge that most of them didn't and being articulate and so on, that helped. And so I worked with salespeople to do all of that. So my job on September 11th was to be the guy doing the basic seminars, running a laptop projector slideshow, using my Braille script so that I knew everything about the slide presentations, including even where things would show up on the screen, because my wife and I created a very detailed script. And so at 8:45, we were getting ready to do the seminars, and the last thing we had to do was to create a list of all the people who would be coming so that we could fax it on letterhead to the Port Authority security people in order that they would know who's coming, so that when somebody came to the security desk, they could say, I'm supposed to go up to the 78th floor to Quantum, and the security people could say, what's your name, and check them off the list because it was on letterhead, and they were allowed to go up rather than having to call us every time one of the 50 people scheduled that day would be coming. So at 8:45, I was literally reaching for letterhead when suddenly the building sort of shuddered and shook. We heard a muffled kind of thud, and then it began to tip in one direction as I'm now tipping my hand toward the camera. Literally, it tipped, I think, like 20 feet. Tall buildings like that are flexible. They're made to bend in the breeze because heavy windstorms and so on could shake buildings. And in fact, an airplane hit the Empire State Building during the 1940s, a military aircraft that got lost in a fog bank. So tall buildings are made to flex, and that's what happened when the airplane hit the building. Everybody says, of course, you didn't know what went on because you couldn't see it. And as I point out, the last time I checked, Superman and X-ray vision are fiction. The building was struck on the north side of its faces at about the 96th floor, technically between floors 93 and 99. We were on the 78th floor on the south side. Excuse me, no one knew what happened. And all the way down the stairs, with the hundreds of people that I interacted with, no one knew what happened because all of our people were on the other side of the building from where the plane hit. Anyway, David and I actually finally said goodbye to each other because we thought we were about to take a 78th floor plunge to the street when the building stopped and it started coming back the other way.
Wow.
And when it got vertical again, I went back into my office. I was standing in the doorway. I grew up on the San Andreas Fault in California, right? Building moves, go stand in doorway. Yeah, a lot of good that does on the 78th floor and you're standing by a non-bearing wall, but it's habit. Anyway, so the bottom line is that after the building stopped moving, I went back in and I met Roselle coming out from under my desk. I told her to heel, which meant to come around on my left side and sit, which she did. And about that time, the building dropped straight down about 6 feet. The reason it dropped is because the expansion joints that make the building flexible went back to their normal configuration, which is exactly what was supposed to happen. Then David looked out the windows and started seeing fire and smoke above us, and I could hear noises outside the window, and he described it as millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside our windows. And he kept saying, we got to get out of here. We can't stay here. We got to get out of here right now. Remember I mentioned that mindset before? It must
Yes.
have clicked in because what I started to say to David was, slow down, we'll get out. No, we got to get out of here right now. We can't stay here. The building's on fire. We had early arrivals, early guests, and they started screaming and moving toward the exit, but then they heard me say, slow down, stop. And they waited to see what was going to happen. And finally, David used what I call the big line. You don't understand. You can't see it. That's what people do. The presumption is if you can't see it, you don't know. And the reality is when you can see it, you don't know. The fact is that David wasn't seeing what I was seeing because he was panicking. What David wasn't seeing was that I had a dog sitting next to me, wagging her tail, yawning, going, who woke me up, not giving any indication of fear. And I knew what Roselle was like when she was afraid because she's afraid of thunderstorms. Well, I finally got David to focus and I said, get our guests to the stairs. Do not let them take elevators because you saw fire. And if that elevator, if those fires are in the at all central part of the building, it's where the elevators are and people are going to perish. So
Absolutely.
don't let them,
Absolutely.
don't let them take the elevators. They got to take the stairs. Well, he got them to the stairs. And meanwhile, I called my wife, Karen. The media hadn't gotten the story yet by any stretch of the imagination. She wanted to know more, and I said, all I know is we must have had some sort of a muffled explosion or something. We don't know more, and when I know more, I'll let you know, but we're leaving the building now. David came back, we swept the offices, we went to the stairs, and we started down. And I won't spend a lot of time telling the entire story, because I know you've only got a limited amount of time to do this, but the bottom line is, as soon as we got into the stairwell, I began smelling an odor. And it took me about four floors to realize that what I was smelling were the fumes from burning jet fumes
Yes.
and burning jet fuel. And I realized that it took me about 4 floors to recognize it, but I realized I'm smelling what I smell at airports. And so I observed to other people around me, that odor is the fumes from burning jet fuel. And they said, yeah, we were
Yes.
trying to figure it out. That's what it is. We must have been hit by an airplane. But that's all we knew. All the way down the stairs, that's all we knew.
And Michael, how many minutes does it? And I'm assuming that this stairwell was totally bumper to bumper with people, butt to butt, as we say. So, how many minutes do you estimate it took from when you entered the stairwell on the 78th floor to get to ground level? About how long was that?
Not estimation, actual fact. We got to the stairs about 9:50 because or 8:50 because I checked my watch. We started down, and at the 30th floor, we met firefighters coming up the stairs. And by then, and I checked my watch again, it was 10 after 9. So it took us 20 minutes to get from floor 78 to floor 30. But then with firefighters coming up and taking a lot of the stairwell, that slowed us down. And it took from 9:10 until 9:35 to get down the other 30 floors. So now that's a total of 45 minutes. And then when we got
Wow.
down to the bottom and got out into the lobby, they wouldn't let anyone go outside through the doors that would go from the lobby to outside, probably because if you had gone outside there, that's where people were jumping from up above, and they didn't want
Yes.
that to be an issue. So people were escorted or shunted through the whole complex to go outside as far away from the Twin Towers as we could be. So we didn't get outside until 9:45. So it was basically almost an hour from the time the plane was hit until we got outside. Once we got outside, David looked around and he said, Mike, there's fire in Tower 2. And I went, what are you talking about? He said, there's fire. We didn't know. The
That the
fact is
second
that
plane had hit.
the fact of the matter is we didn't feel it. We didn't hear it. We were in our own little cocoon, if you will, our own little cave going down. All we knew was when we got outside, we were told to leave the area. So we went over to Broadway and started walking north on Broadway. We were on the west side of the street. So to my right was Broadway and to my left was a building. We crossed several streets. We got to Vesey Street and David said, I can see the fire really clear. We're close to Tower 2. I want to take some pictures because he saw the fire in Tower 2 that we had no idea about.
Yes.
We thought maybe the fire just jumped across from our building because we had no clue. David took out his camera and was taking pictures. I tried to call my wife Karen. I couldn't get through. The circuits were busy
Right.
because
Everybody
clearly
was swamped.
people was saying goodbye to their loved ones.
Yes.
And so I had just put my phone away and David was putting his camera away when a police officer yelled, "Get out of here, it's coming down now." We heard this rumble that became this deafening roar. I described the sound as kind of a combination of a freight train and a waterfall. You could hear metal clattering and clashing and glass breaking and so on. And then the white noise of Tower 2, which was about 100 yards away from us, collapsing. Everyone turned and ran. David turned and ran. He was gone. I turned Roselle 180 degrees and started running back the way we came, and we got to the next street now going back. So that was Fulton Street that we had crossed a little while before. And I turned right on Fulton Street because there was debris falling around us, and I was hoping I could get out of some of the line of fire from that debris. And it helped a little. I ran about 25 yards and suddenly caught up to David because it turns out that that's the way he had run. And when I caught up to David, he apologized. And I said, "Don't worry about it. Let's keep going." And we ran, and we suddenly were engulfed in all the dust and the dirt and debris from Tower 2's collapse. And we knew we had to get out of it. So now to my right was the building because we were going the other way. And I told Roselle, "Go right, right." I don't know whether she could hear me or see my hand signals, but she must have known what I want because suddenly I heard an opening on the right and she turned to right to go into that opening, took one step and stopped and wouldn't move. She froze. And I'm going, "Come on, Roselle." Nope, she wouldn't move. And I realized she stopped for a reason. She's a guide dog. So
Yes.
upon investigation, I realized that we were at the top of a flight of stairs. She did exactly what she was supposed to do. She got a hug for it, and then I said forward, which is the right command, and we went down the stairs and ended up in the arcade entrance to the Fulton Street subway station. We were there with some other people, and an employee of the subway system, a guy named Lou, came and got us and took us all. He discovered us there and took us to an employee locker room. There were already a few other people there, and we just sat there and tried to make sense of it all. And we were there about 15 minutes when a police officer came and said, "The air is clear up above. You can't stay here. You need to leave." And he wouldn't wait for discussion. He turned and we just followed him back to the stairs, up the stairs, through the arcade that I mentioned earlier, and then up the last 2 flights of stairs. And we got outside and David looked around and he said, "Oh my God, Mike, there's no Tower 2 anymore." And I said, "What do you see?" And he said, "All I see are pillars of smoke, hundreds of feet tall. There's no Tower 2. It's gone." And we stood there kind of in shock, not understanding. And then we just continued to walk on Fulton Street. We were walking west on Fulton, and we walked about 10 minutes, and then we were in this little plaza area when we heard that freight train waterfall sound again, and we knew that it must be our tower collapsing. And David looked back and he said, "There's another dust cloud coming." There was a little retaining wall there, so we got behind it and ducked down, and we waited till everything passed and the sound subsided. We stood up, and David looked around and he said, "Oh my God, Mike, there's no World Trade Center anymore." And I said again, "What do you see?" And he said, "All I see are fingers of fire and flame hundreds of feet tall and pillars of smoke. It's gone." And to think we had gone in 3 hours before just to do our jobs, and in the blink of an eye, literally, it was all gone. We stood there a couple minutes, and then I tried to call my wife, Karen, and this time I got through to her, and she's the first one who told us how 2 aircraft had been deliberately hijacked and crashed into the towers, a third to the Pentagon, and a fourth was still missing over Pennsylvania. And that's when we knew what happened. I do want to say one other thing. I want to talk about David for a moment. As we were going down the stairs, when we got to about the 50th floor, suddenly David said, "Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here." And I just yelled at David, "Stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you." And he told me later that brought him out of the funk that he was going into. And what he wanted to do, he said, was to walk a floor below me and shout up to me what he saw. And he wanted to do that because he wanted to get his mind off of what was going on and off of his imagination. So he wanted something to do. So I said, "Okay, go ahead." So he started doing that. You know, when I got to the 49th floor, he said, "Hey, Mike, I'm at the 48th floor, going on down." Walked down a few more floors. I was on 45, and he said, "Hey, Mike, I'm at the 44th floor. This is where the Port Authority cafeteria is. Not stopping, going on down." And why do I mention that? Because in reality, we all stayed pretty calm going down the stairs. And I think that David shouting up to me was important, not for me necessarily, because I've got to go down the stairs anyway. But what David did was, in his shouting of 42nd floor, all's okay, anyone within the sound of his voice knew that there was someone above them or below them who was okay on the stairs. His actions had to help keep lots of people focused going down the stairs, and that doesn't get talked about much. So I like to bring that up because I know that what he did helped a great deal, whether anyone recognizes it or even remembers it or not. But eventually, as I said, we talked to Karen, and then we started moving up toward Midtown Manhattan. And later that afternoon, I learned the trains were running, and went with David to the Penn Station train station and caught a train out to New Jersey. David left me there and walked up to the Upper East Side. He wanted to stay with his sister, and so that was where he was staying anyway. So I went to New Jersey, and he did that. And I called my wife and told her a friend of ours, Tom Painter, who had been a friend of Karen since high school out in California, was also living in New Jersey. And as soon as he heard that something happened, he just came down to our house, not knowing whether I was working from home that day or in the office or what. He drove Karen to the train station, and they picked me up, and we went home. And so it was kind of over. And as soon as we got home, I took Roselle's harness off. I wanted to take her outside. She would have none of it. She just ran off and grabbed her favorite tug bone and started playing tug of war with my retired guide dog, Linny, because it was over for her. It was all done. She was fine. Nothing threatened her. And so she wanted to play. Dogs don't do what if. And in my new book, Live Like a Guide Dog, that's one of the things that we talk about. We focus so much as humans on trying to control everything or worrying about controlling everything that we don't recognize there's only a very limited amount of stuff that we have control over. And if we would stop trying to worry about and control every little thing, especially all the stuff we don't have influence over, we would be a lot less fearful, we would be a lot more open to trust, and we would live much better lives.
This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America. Please subscribe on your favorite platform.